I felt the weight of every stare before I even stepped through the church doors. My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing like a warning, and I could feel my uncle's eyes slicing across me from the front pew. He didn't even bother with a whisper. His voice carried through the air like a sermon of accusation. "You're only here for money," he spat. Everyone froze. My chest tightened. I wanted to sink into the floor, but I forced my shoulders back and swallowed the sudden bile rising in my throat. The room smelled of lilies and stale coffee, a clash that made my stomach churn. I saw my cousin shift uncomfortably, glances darting between him and me. My father's absence was louder than any sound in the room. He had left me a month ago, quietly, with nothing but debts and an old apartment that smelled like mildew and regret. And here I was, standing in the echo of a life that had never made sense, being accused of greed by the man who had watched me stumble through my childhood. The lawyer cleared his throat, an oddly calm sound against the chaos of my uncle's accusation. He stepped forward holding a small, sealed box. Brown, unmarked, except for the crisp wax seal that had my father's emblem pressed into it. My fingers itched to break it open, but the lawyer's eyes held a warning I couldn't. "Not here. Not now." "I believe this is for Miss Hart," he said, and my uncle's snarl twisted further. "It was left by your father. He wanted it delivered personally." My uncle's voice hitched with rage, sharp enough to make the pews tremble. "Do you hear me? He hated her. You think he'd leave her anything?" The box felt impossibly heavy in my hands, though it was barely the size of a jewelry case. I could feel the faint vibration of something inside, a heartbeat almost, or maybe it was mine. My uncle leaned forward, lips curled, and I wanted to scream at him, tell him he had no right to define my grief or my inheritance, but the tears that had formed stayed lodged behind my eyes, brittle and hot. People shuffled, murmurs rolling like soft thunder. My cousins avoided looking at me, or maybe at the box. Everyone wanted a story, a drama, but none wanted the truth, that my father's life had been a labyrinth of debts, threats, and secrets I had only begun to understand. I left the church without a word, ignoring the stabbing eyes that followed me out, gripping the box as if it were the last piece of him left on this earth. At the car, I sat with the engine running and the box on my lap. The wax seal glinted under the streetlight, the darkened parking lot making it look almost sacred. I could barely breathe, and I wasn't sure if it was fear or anticipation or guilt for even hoping that maybe he had left me something that mattered beyond money. I tore open the seal in the safety of my apartment, careful to preserve the paper as it crumbled under my fingers. Inside, there was a thick stack of letters, all bound by a red ribbon and yellowed with age. I lifted the top letter and unfolded it slowly, my father's handwriting jagged, urgent, and full of mistakes he never corrected. "My dearest Ellie," it began. My father always called me Ellie. He rarely called me by my full name, which made this letter feel like a fragment of him I had never been allowed to touch. "If you are reading this, I am gone, but I need you to know the truth about everything, about the family, about the money, and about him." My uncle's name stared back at me from the paper as if it were a brand. "He will try to rewrite our story, claim your presence is greed, and bury the truth in lies. You must protect yourself and the legacy I leave you. Inside this box is proof of what he did, and evidence of what they never wanted you to see." My hands shook as I sifted through the contents. Bank statements with hidden accounts, receipts from properties I didn't know existed, letters between my father and his lawyer about hidden assets. There were photographs too, images of my uncle signing documents, faces masked with false smiles, and the faces of people who had trusted him only to be cheated out of everything. I felt my pulse hammering, the slow burn of vindication building. I thought back to the funeral, to my uncle's venomous words, to the way he tried to frame me as a greedy child. Every piece of paper in that box was a dagger aimed at the truth he had worked so hard to bury. And I realized, for the first time in years, that I had power. Not the hollow power of money, but the quiet, terrible power of proof. The first letter ended with instructions: do not confront him directly. Do not be tempted by immediate revenge. Watch. Wait. Gather. The law will see him for what he is if you are patient. And Ellie, make sure he never sees this coming. My stomach knotted, a mixture of fear and adrenaline. He had underestimated me, as he always had. The phone rang, sharp and insistent, breaking the silence of the apartment. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me it was connected to the letters, to the web my father had left behind. I answered, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor I felt. "Miss Hart," a calm voice asked. "This is from the law office handling your father's estate. We have documents that need your immediate attention regarding certain accounts, unclaimed assets, and we require your authorization to proceed." I nodded, gripping the letters to my chest like armor. "Yes," I said. "I'll be there." After I hung up, I sat back against the wall, trying to process what was happening. The funeral had been a battlefield, but this was the start of the war I had been too young to fight before. And I wasn't going to lose. The first step was to organize everything, cross-reference the statements, the photos, the letters. Every line of ink was a map, every photograph a witness. My father had left me the tools, and I would use them. But the more I looked, the more I realized how deep the deception ran. It wasn't just my uncle. It was cousins, lawyers, bankers, everyone who had smiled in public while hiding their teeth. I paused on a photograph that made my stomach turn, my uncle shaking hands with a man I recognized from an old lawsuit my father had lost years ago. The timing didn't match any public record, it was recent. He had been trying to cover tracks even while pretending to mourn. My hands ached to act, but the letter's warning echoed in my mind. Wait. Gather. Let the law do its work. Patience was a weapon, and I hadn't wielded it before. I spread the documents across the table, my apartment suddenly feeling like a war room. Every receipt, every statement, every photograph, proof of manipulation, fraud, and betrayal. And yet, the one thing I couldn't find in any of it was closure. Not for my father. Not for me. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the papers. I could feel eyes in every corner, past and present converging. I thought about the funeral again, my uncle's sneer, my cousin's silence, the whispers of greedy daughter that had followed me out. And I understood, fully, that nothing would ever be the same. I had stepped into a game I didn't choose but was forced to play, and the rules were ruthless. Then I noticed something tucked beneath the ribbon of letters, a small, unmarked USB drive. My father's handwriting, tiny and precise, read, "For when the paper can't speak." My heart skipped. The letters had shown me his world, but the drive, it promised to expose the network, the hidden accounts, the phone calls, the unseen hands that had built walls between me and my inheritance. I almost didn't dare touch it. Almost. But then, as if his voice whispered from the pages, I pressed my fingers against it and knew that my father had left me more than money. He had left me the means to rewrite the story that everyone thought they controlled. The apartment was silent except for my own breathing. Outside, the city hummed like a distant reminder that life continued, indifferent to grief and betrayal. And inside, I realized that I had to move carefully. Every step, every choice, every glance at the wrong person could unravel the plan my father had entrusted to me. I sat back, staring at the wall where the sun's last rays fell, and made a choice. I wouldn't be the girl accused of greed at her father's funeral. I wouldn't rush, I wouldn't act blindly, and I certainly wouldn't allow my uncle to see me falter. Somewhere in the stack of letters, in the photographs, in the statements, my father had written a confession that would crush him. But before I revealed it, I had to understand it. Every lie, every hidden transaction, every falsified document, I had to know it all. Only then could the truth hit with the full force it deserved. I felt the weight of the box on my lap again, heavier now not with paper, but with purpose. And as night settled over the city, I realized that revenge wasn't about a single moment. It was about the long, careful dismantling of a life built on deceit. I leaned forward and opened my laptop, the USB drive gleaming in the dim light. What was on it could ruin my uncle forever, but only if I was smart enough to follow the breadcrumbs my father had left. The first file loaded, and my breath caught in my throat. Hidden accounts, coded emails, recorded conversations, proof of collusion that I had only glimpsed in letters. The magnitude of it made my hands shake, and for the first time in years, I smiled, not with joy, but with the kind of anticipation that comes when power shifts silently, inevitably, into your hands. I heard a knock at the door, light but deliberate. My heart leapt. Who could it be at this hour? My uncle? A lawyer? A nosy cousin? I paused, staring at the box, at the letters, at the USB drive. Whoever it was, they didn't know that the game had changed. The knock came again. Louder this time. And I realized with a cold certainty that whatever was outside, my life had just entered a chapter from which there was no turning back. I rose slowly, gripping the box as if it were a shield. Opening the door would be a choice, a gamble, and I could feel every nerve in my body screaming with anticipation. When I turned the knob, I saw the shadow in the hallway. The silhouette was familiar, tall, and impossibly smug. Before I could speak, it smiled. And that smile, oh, that smile, was the kind that had underestimated me for decades. I froze, the box pressed to my chest, as my uncle's face emerged from the dim hallway light. He tilted his head, pretending casualness, but his eyes flicked immediately to the wax seal and the red ribbon of letters I still held tightly. Well, he said slowly, voice smooth, rehearsed. Looks like you found something that doesn't belong to you. I swallowed hard, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. It belongs to my father, I said. The words came out sharp, brittle, but true. He left it for me. His laugh was low, almost a purr, but it carried a venom that made the air heavy. Your father, he shook his head, smirking as if he were revisiting an old joke only he understood. He may have thought he could leave secrets, but everything is already out there. Do you really think you can turn this against me? I bristled, but I kept my tone even, controlled. You've been careful, yes, but not careful enough. And not smart enough to anticipate that I'd actually read everything he left behind. He took a step forward, and I instinctively took one back. The hallway was narrow, the tension electric. He glanced at the letters, the USB drive on the table behind me, then back at me. Be careful, Ellie. You've always been too impulsive. I've learned patience, I said, and the words felt foreign and powerful on my tongue. My father wanted me to wait. He wanted me to gather everything before making a move. That's exactly what I've done. He tilted his head, his smile fading slightly, replaced by the faintest hint of unease. You think a few letters, some files, a USB drive, that's enough to ruin me? I set the box down slowly, deliberately, letting him see the stack of letters. This is just the beginning. Every lie, every manipulated account, every fraud, it's all here. And I know where to start. His jaw tightened. I saw it, the first crack in the carefully constructed mask. You wouldn't dare, he said, a little too quietly. I would, I admit it. But I won't act recklessly. I've studied everything. I've cross-referenced every statement, every photograph, every transaction you thought was hidden. And I have witnesses. He laughed again, but it lacked the conviction of before. Witnesses, he scoffed. You mean, people you've convinced to? I cut him off. No, people who were there. People you thought you controlled. But you didn't count on me finding their records, their emails, their receipts. You've underestimated me my whole life. That ends now. His breathing changed, just enough that I noticed. The arrogance slipping, the self-assurance faltering. He straightened his shoulders, tried to mask it, but I could see it in the twitch of his fingers, the slight narrowing of his eyes. You're bluffing, he said, voice strained. No, I said. I'm proving you wrong, slowly, and with law and evidence on my side. My father taught me this. You didn't even see it coming. For a long moment, we stared at each other, the hallway silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. I realized he was calculating, weighing threats, scanning the room for escape routes, but this wasn't a game he could win with intimidation. Not anymore. Then he shifted, one hand brushing his suit jacket, as if reaching for something. I stiffened, ready for anything, but he only sighed. You've grown into him, he said finally, voice low, almost a confession. He would have been proud. The words caught me off guard. My father proud? In all the chaos, all the lies, all the theft? For one heartbeat, I allowed myself to imagine that it was true. But then reality snapped back, he hadn't changed. Not really. Pride wasn't a gift, it was a weapon. I lifted the USB drive slowly. "I'll give you a chance," I said. "A small one. If you cooperate, if you admit what's been done, if you help me undo the damage legally, maybe it won't get worse." He froze. And in that pause, I knew he realized something, that I held not just his past against him, but his future. The leverage was total, unshakable. For the first time, his mask cracked completely. I saw fear flicker in his eyes, the same fear he had instilled in others for years. I didn't move, didn't speak. I let it simmer, letting him face the weight of the evidence, the inevitability of exposure, and the knowledge that I wasn't afraid. Finally, he spoke, voice tighter now. "This isn't over," he said. "It is," I replied, and it was more than a declaration, it was the truth. Not the end of the story, but the start of accountability. And as I watched him retreat down the hallway, I felt something shift inside me. The anger, the grief, the feeling of being underestimated, it had transformed into clarity, precision, and resolve. I picked up the letters again, the USB drive next to them, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled without guilt. Not a happy smile, not relief, but the kind that comes from knowing you finally have the upper hand, and you know how to use it. There was a long road ahead, full of legal battles, exposure, and confrontation, but I was ready. Every photograph, every document, every email was a step toward justice. And justice, slow and deliberate, was far more satisfying than any immediate revenge my uncle had imagined. I sank back into my chair, the city lights casting patterns across the walls, and whispered to the memory of my father, "I won't fail you. Not now. Not ever." Then I turned the laptop back on, the files open, and began the work that would dismantle the empire of lies, one carefully measured move at a time. The first domino had already fallen. The next morning, the apartment felt heavier, almost suffocating, with the stack of letters, statements, and USB drives spread across the dining table like a battlefield. I hadn't slept much. Every hour of the night had been consumed by scanning documents, cross-referencing accounts, and piecing together the network my uncle had built. By sunrise, patterns emerged, gaps in his defenses, mistakes only someone meticulous enough to care could spot. The first call came at 8:07 a.m. from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated but answered. "Miss Hart." The voice was professional, calm, precise. "This is Detective Harris. I've been assigned to investigate financial fraud linked to your father's estate. There have been some irregularities, and we need your cooperation." I stayed quiet for a moment, letting the weight of the word irregularities sink in. "I have documents," I said carefully, "proof of everything. My father left them for me. Bank statements, letters, emails. Everything." "Excellent," he replied. "We'll need copies, and your testimony may be required. And, if I'm honest, your uncle has been under the radar for too long. Some people are quietly waiting for someone like you to step forward." I felt a shiver, not fear exactly, but the premonition that my father's warning was coming true. The system, finally, could see what I had only glimpsed in letters and photographs. After the call, I spent the morning methodically digitizing everything. Every photograph, every email, every handwritten note was cataloged, time-stamped, cross-referenced. I realized that patience wasn't just a strategy, it was armor. One false move and I could lose credibility, but one calculated release of proof could crumble my uncle's empire like a house of cards. By midday, I was exhausted but driven. I remembered the funeral, my uncle's words echoing in my head, "You're only here for money." He had underestimated me not because I was greedy, but because he had assumed my grief and youth made me weak. The irony was delicious. The knock came at the door again, this time accompanied by the soft creak of a hinge and a familiar voice, cautious. "Ellie?" "My cousin Marissa." Her tone was hesitant, unsure. I heard what happened at the funeral. Can we talk?" I studied her carefully. Her family had always been loyal to my uncle, feeding his ego, covering his mistakes, pretending to be innocent. I didn't trust her, not yet. "Come in," I said finally, keeping my voice neutral. She stepped inside, glancing nervously at the box of documents. I didn't know he'd gone this far," she admitted, voice low. I thought it was normal. That's how he's always been." I held her gaze, letting the silence stretch, weighing her honesty. Normal. I repeated. This is fraud, manipulation, theft. My father left me everything to prove it. Do you understand what that means? Marissa swallowed hard. Yes, and I think, maybe you're the only one who can stop him. I didn't want to see it, but I think he's dangerous. Not just to you, but to everyone. For a moment, I studied her, the hesitation, the guilt, the sudden awareness. She could be an ally or a trap. But I needed someone on the inside who could confirm things, who had seen him in his natural habitat of deception. All right, I said slowly, then you follow my lead. Nothing else. You don't tell anyone, you don't act on your own. And you do exactly as I say. Do you understand? Yes, she whispered. The first real smile in days broke across my face, not warm, not comforting, but strategic. Allies were rare, and even partial ones mattered. By the afternoon, I had a plan. Step 1. Document everything legally. Make a chain of evidence so airtight even my uncle couldn't manipulate it. Step 2. Subtly confirm witness statements, emails, bank logs, and ensure that anyone who might speak out had corroborating proof. Step 3. Let the law take its course while keeping him unaware that I had already begun unraveling everything. Hours later, as the sun dipped again, Marissa whispered, he's been keeping an account overseas. Hidden, coded. He thought no one would ever find it. I felt my heart pound. Where? I demanded. She hesitated. I have access. Only because I handle some of the family's financial correspondence. I can get you the details, but it's risky. I leaned in, voice tight. Do it. Every transaction, every entry, every number. Cross-reference it with the letters and emails from the box. I need to see the full picture. Marissa nodded, and the weight of it all pressed against me. Fear, anticipation, adrenaline. Every detail mattered. Every second counted. And somewhere deep inside, I realized that the war was no longer hypothetical. My uncle had underestimated me completely, and that was his greatest mistake. By evening, we had uncovered the first series of offshore accounts, coded messages, and signed documents proving manipulation of property and inheritance. Each file was another nail in the coffin of his reputation, and every new discovery sent a thrill through me, a mix of fear, righteous anger, and the intoxicating sense of control I had never felt before. Then, just as I was about to log off, an email pinged on my laptop, a message with no subject line, no sender listed, and a single attachment labeled, "Don't trust her." My stomach dropped. I stared at Marissa. She looked as frightened as I felt. Someone knew. And the game was about to get a lot more dangerous. I froze, my finger hovering over the mouse, heart hammering like a warning bell. The words, "Don't trust her," burned across the screen, a single line but heavy with threat. My pulse raced as I glanced at Marissa, whose eyes widened, lips parting slightly in shock. I don't know who," she started, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Don't speak," I said quietly. "Not yet. Anyone could have sent this. Could be him, could be someone else in the family. Could even be someone watching us right now." Her hands trembled slightly, and I realized how high the stakes had become. The sanctuary of my apartment no longer felt safe. Every decision, every move could be observed, anticipated, twisted. My father's warning echoed in my mind. Do not confront him directly. Do not be tempted by immediate revenge. Watch. Wait. Gather. I had been following it religiously, until this message forced me to question every ally, every step I'd taken. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath, letting the tension settle just enough for clarity. I needed to confirm Marissa's loyalty and the source of the message before making any move. My instinct screamed that acting too quickly could ruin everything my father had left behind. "Listen to me," I said, my voice firm. "We verify everything. We don't respond. We document this. Whoever sent it thinks they can intimidate me. They don't know who I've become." Marissa nodded slowly, still shaken, but compliant. I pulled up my father's letters again, rereading the passages about patience and precision. "Wait. Gather. The law will see him for what he is if you are patient. Every word was a lifeline, a reminder that fear was a weapon I couldn't let him wield. I opened the attachment cautiously. It was a single image, my father's handwriting on a torn page, the same handwriting as the letters, but with a note added in a different, jagged scrawl. She trusts the wrong person. Watch her. My stomach sank. This wasn't just a warning, it was personal. Someone knew about Marissa's involvement. Someone had eyes inside my circle. I closed the laptop and looked at Marissa, meeting her gaze fully for the first time. Did you tell anyone about the accounts we found? I asked. She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. No. I swear. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the warning wasn't random, it came from knowledge. Someone inside our operation was aware of what we were uncovering. We have to move carefully, I said. And we need proof. If anyone is trying to manipulate us, I want to catch them in the act. Do you understand? Yes, she whispered, almost too softly. The rest of the evening passed in tense silence. We worked side by side, cross-referencing bank statements with emails and tracing coded transfers. Every discovery was like uncovering another layer of deceit. My father had left me the breadcrumbs. Now it was my job to follow them without falling into the trap someone had clearly set. By midnight, we had compiled enough evidence to confirm the first offshore account, tracing the flow of funds through several shell companies. It was enough to begin the legal process, to alert the authorities without giving my uncle any inkling that we were aware. Just as I was about to shut down the laptop, another email arrived, this one marked urgent. The subject line read, "Meet me. Alone. Midnight. The docks." I froze, a cold shiver running down my spine. The city outside was quiet now, the streets empty, but the threat felt immediate, palpable. Marissa's hand touched my arm, hesitant. "Ellie, maybe we should ignore it," she suggested, fear creeping into her voice. I shook my head, decision hardening inside me. No. This is either someone who can give us answers or someone who wants to scare us into making a mistake. Either way, I need to know. The USB drive, the letters, the photographs, all my father's legacy, rested in my bag. I wouldn't leave without them. I grabbed a small flashlight, checked my phone, and made sure Marissa had a backup plan, someone to call if I didn't return. The walk to the docks was tense, each step echoing in the empty streets. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows over rusted metal and stagnant water. The air smelled of salt and oil, heavy and cold. A figure waited near a shipping container, face obscured by a hood. I slowed, hand on the box, pulse racing. Every instinct screamed caution, every sense sharpened to the point of pain. "You came," a voice called, calm but edged with warning. "Who are you?" I demanded, keeping my distance. The figure stepped forward, hood falling back slightly to reveal a familiar face. My breath caught. Someone I hadn't expected. Someone from the very family I thought I could trust. "You shouldn't trust Marissa," the figure said, voice low, dangerous and certain. "Everything she's telling you is only part of the truth." My chest tightened. I realized then that the web of deceit was deeper than I imagined, and the real game, my father's legacy versus my uncle's empire, was about to become far more dangerous than I had prepared for. I felt the first twinge of fear in days, not for myself, but for the truth, and for the fragile control I had begun to seize. I tightened my grip on the box. "Tell me everything," I said, voice steady, though my heart thundered. The figure smiled thinly. "You're going to wish you hadn't." I froze, the words settling in like ice in my veins. The figure's smile was sharp, predatory, and I realized instantly I had walked straight into a trap. But my father's voice echoed in my mind, "Wait, gather, let the law see him for what he is." "I'm not leaving without answers," I said, keeping my voice calm, steady. My hand never left the box. "You tell me what I need to know now." "Everything." The figure stepped closer, shadows stretching over the concrete. The face was familiar enough to make my stomach churn. Lucas, my cousin's husband, a man I had seen countless times at family gatherings, smiling innocently while helping my uncle cover ledgers and accounts I'd only just begun to uncover. "You have no idea what you're holding," he said, voice low. "And you have no idea how dangerous it is to dig this deep." I think I do, I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. And I'm willing to see it through. My father left this for me. Every letter, every photograph, every document points to what's been done. Lucas laughed softly, the sound echoing off the metal containers. Do you really think your father could protect you? Against all of us? Against him. He spat the last word like it was poison. Uncle. I squared my shoulders. I don't need protection. I need the truth. And I'll use the law. That's my weapon. He shook his head slowly. The law only sees what you let it see. And you've already been misled by her. He jerked a thumb toward the shadows of the street. Marissa is not on your side. She's been feeding you information, but only enough to make you think you're in control. You've already walked into a plan she set in motion. My heart raced. I had trusted her, partially, but the warning email, the midnight message, all of it clicked into place. Someone had been watching every step. Someone had predicted that I would move too fast, that I would believe in a partial ally. What do you want from me? I asked, steadying my voice though my pulse thudded in my ears. I want you to stop, he said simply. Leave the box. Walk away. Let the Empire stand. Or, he paused, letting the threat hang. You'll lose everything. And trust me, you'll regret it. I stared at him, the city quiet except for the faint slap of water against the dock. I felt a slow, furious clarity settle over me. Fear was a tool, yes, but anger, focus, and patience were weapons I had learned from my father. I'm not walking away, I said. And I don't need your permission to seek justice. My father trusted me with this, and I will see it through. All of it. Every account, every lie, every hidden transaction. Lucas' eyes narrowed, a flicker of something, respect, crossing his face. You're braver than I thought, he muttered. Or maybe just desperate. Maybe both, I said. But don't underestimate me again. He took a step back, hands raised slightly in a gesture of surrender, and I realized he wasn't attacking me, he was warning me. And that meant someone else, higher up, was watching, controlling, orchestrating. The real danger wasn't him, it was the network, the people who had built this empire of lies around my father's death, my inheritance, and my family. You're going to regret this, he said finally, retreating into the shadows. Not today. Not tomorrow. But soon enough. I didn't respond. My grip on the box tightened, and I watched him disappear into the night, swallowed by the darkness of the docks. I knew then that the war was no longer just about uncovering my uncle's crimes. It was about surviving the people who had shielded him, manipulated me, and tried to control my every move. The letters, the documents, the USB, they were powerful, yes, but only if I played this carefully. Every step miscalculated could cost me everything. I made my way back to the apartment, heart still racing, thoughts spinning. Marissa would need to know immediately that Lucas had shown up and that he'd confirmed what I had begun to suspect. Betrayal ran deeper than just one cousin. When I opened the door, I felt a cold prickling along my spine. The apartment was the same, but something was off. The letters and USB were where I'd left them. My laptop was closed. But the faint scent of perfume, one I didn't recognize, hung in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Someone had been here while I was gone. My stomach nodded. I moved slowly toward the table, inspecting every item. Nothing seemed missing, but the message was clear. I was being watched, even in my supposed sanctuary. The trap had expanded. I sat down, trying to steady my breathing, and opened the USB. I needed to make a record of everything before anyone could tamper with it. The files were still intact, transactions, emails, photographs, recordings. Every piece of evidence my father had left, every secret my uncle had buried, every lie someone had tried to shield. And suddenly, amid the folders, I noticed something new. One folder I hadn't seen before, for Ellie Private. I hesitated, my hand hovering over it. My father's handwriting was unmistakable on the label, but the timing, how had it appeared now? Only one possibility came to mind. He had anticipated every step I would take, even after he was gone. With a slow, deliberate breath, I opened the folder. Inside were video recordings, my father speaking, giving context to every document, explaining the relationships, the hidden transactions, even naming names. He had left me instructions, confessions, and proof in real time, speaking as if he knew I would need to see and hear it to understand the magnitude of what I was up against. And I realized fully that my father hadn't just left me evidence. He had left me a guide, a plan for dismantling everything, step by step. The war was no longer abstract. It was here in my hands, and it was mine to fight. My father's face filled the screen, older than I remembered, eyes tired but sharp. He spoke calmly, deliberately, like a man who knew exactly how little time he had left. "If you're watching this, Ellie," he said, "then they've already started circling you. That means you're doing something right." My throat closed. I hadn't expected his voice to hit me like that, solid, present, undeniable. This wasn't a memory. This was him, reaching across time. "There are 3 things you must understand," he continued. "First, your uncle didn't act alone. Second, at least one person will pretend to help you while actively feeding him information. Third, fear will be used before force. If you're scared but unharmed, it's because they still think you can be controlled." I felt my hands curl into fists. He leaned closer to the camera. "Do not confront anyone emotionally. Do not reveal what you have. And never assume betrayal comes from the loudest voice. It usually comes from the most comforting one." Marissa's face flashed in my mind. Then Lucas. Then half a dozen others. The video cut to another file. This one showed documents scrolling on screen while my father narrated offshore accounts layered beneath shell corporations, properties transferred through proxies, signatures forged with frightening precision. Names appeared in the margins. Lawyers, bank officers, family friends. And then my uncle's name appeared again and again, always at the center. He built his power on appearing respectable, my father said. That is also his weakness. He fears exposure more than prison. Image is everything. The final clip loaded automatically. My father looked directly into the camera, softer now. "You might wonder why I didn't stop him myself. Why I let it go this far. The truth is, I needed him to overreach. I needed records. Time creates mistakes. And you, Ellie, were always meant to be the one he underestimated." I pressed my hand over my mouth. Tears blurred the screen, but I didn't look away. "When the moment comes," he said, "you won't feel triumphant. You'll feel steady. That's how you'll know you're doing it right." The video ended. Silence swallowed the room. I sat there for a long time, letting it all settle. The fear. The betrayal. The clarity. My father hadn't just left me proof, he'd left me timing. And now I knew exactly why the intimidation had started. They sensed the shift before they could see it. I didn't call Marissa. Instead, I created a mirror drive and encrypted every file. I uploaded copies to a secure legal repository under an attorney's name my father had vetted years ago. Then I drafted a timeline, every interaction, every message, every unexplained visit. Including the docs. Including Lucas. Including the perfume in my apartment. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Marissa, are you okay?" "You didn't answer." I stared at the message, my pulse calm in a way that surprised me. "Me, I'm fine. I just needed some space." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Marissa, Ellie, please. We need to stay aligned." Aligned. I thought of my father's words. The most comforting voice. I didn't respond. The next morning, the first legal notice went out not to my uncle, but to one of the banks tied to the offshore accounts. Quiet. Procedural. Unavoidable. By noon, a second notice followed, this one triggering an internal audit. By evening, my uncle called. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Then it rang again. And again. I didn't answer. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to him. I was setting the pace. 2 days later, the lawyer from the funeral requested an emergency meeting. His voice was tight, controlled, professional, but I heard the strain underneath. "There are questions," he said. "About certain assets. Transfers that don't align with the estate filings." "Questions are good," I replied. "They usually lead to answers." When I arrived at his office, my uncle was already there. He stood when he saw me, face flushed, smile brittle. "Ellie," he said warmly, too warmly. "This has all gotten very confusing. We should clear things up as a family." I sat across from him and folded my hands. No, I said quietly. We shouldn't. The lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Hart has provided documentation that suggests. My uncle cut him off. This is a misunderstanding. She's emotional. Grief does things to people. I met his eyes. Held them. Grief made me careful, I said. You should be worried about what clarity does. For a split second, I saw it. Not anger. Not rage. Fear. Pure, unfiltered fear, because he finally understood that the girl he dismissed at the funeral hadn't come for money. She'd come with receipts. And this time, I wasn't leaving quietly. His smile stayed frozen too long. The lawyer noticed. I noticed. My uncle noticed that we noticed, and that was when his hand twitched against the table, just once, like a reflex he couldn't control. Ellie, he said again, slower now, voice dropping into something almost paternal, this doesn't need to become ugly. The word landed heavy between us. The lawyer cleared his throat and slid a folder across the table toward me. We've identified discrepancies tied to 3 holding companies. Funds moved after your father's death. Some signatures don't match known samples. My uncle leaned back, folding his arms. I manage complex assets. Of course there are transfers. That doesn't mean. It means, I interrupted, surprised at how steady my voice sounded, that money was moved from accounts legally frozen under probate. Which is a crime. Silence. The lawyer didn't look at my uncle this time. He looked at me. Ms. Hart, are you formally alleging fraud? I didn't answer immediately. I thought of my father's face on the screen. Image is everything. I thought of the funeral. The accusation. The eyes on me. Yes, I said. I am. My uncle laughed sharply. Too sharply. You have no idea what you're doing. I do, I replied. And so will the auditors. And the bank. And eventually, the court. The lawyer closed the folder with a soft, final sound. Then I'm obligated to notify the appropriate authorities and step aside from representing the family in this matter. My uncle's head snapped toward him. You can't. I can, the lawyer said calmly. And I will. That was the moment something broke. My uncle stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is betrayal, he snapped, pointing at me. After everything I've done for you. For this family. I stood too. My knees didn't shake. You didn't do anything for me. You did things to people. And now it's catching up. His face flushed deep red. You think you've won? You think this ends well for you? I leaned in just enough for him to hear me and only me. I don't need to win. I just need the truth to be public. His eyes started, calculating again. Always calculating. You'll tear this family apart. I held his gaze. You already did. I'm just the one who stopped pretending. I walked out before he could say anything else. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Marissa. I let it ring. Then a text. Marissa, why didn't you tell me about the meeting? I stared at the message, my thumb hovering. Me, because I needed to know who would panic. Seconds passed. Then, what does that mean? I didn't reply. That night, the first article went live. Buried in the business section, small headline, careful wording. Estate under review amid allegations of financial irregularities. By morning, it had spread. By afternoon, my uncle's office was searched. By evening, my phone wouldn't stop ringing from cousins, distant relatives, people who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly desperate to check in. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sat on my apartment floor, back against the couch, laptop open, watching the notifications stack up. Audit confirmed. Secondary accounts flagged. Legal counsel withdrawn. Then a message came through from an unknown number. You think you're safe now? I stared at it, heart steady. Me, I think you're running out of places to hide. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. I didn't hear from him again that night. But I knew this wasn't over. Exposure never ends things cleanly. It drags them into the light inch by inch, stripping away illusions, forcing choices. And the hardest part wasn't the fear anymore. It was realizing how many people had known. How many had stayed silent? How many were only scared now because the silence had finally broken? I closed the laptop and looked around my apartment, The letters, the box, the proof that had changed everything. I hadn't come to destroy a man. I had come to stop a lie from outliving my father. And whatever came next, I would face it standing. Because I wasn't the girl at the funeral anymore. I was the reason the truth was finally unavoidable. The first subpoena arrived 3 days later. It wasn't dramatic. No knock on my door. No raised voices. Just a thick envelope slid under my apartment door by a courier who didn't look twice at me. White paper. Black ink. Clinical language. And my uncle's name typed neatly in the center like it had always belonged there. I sat on the floor and read it twice. Then I cried. Not because I felt sorry for him. Not because I was afraid. I cried because something inside me finally released the constant vigilance, the feeling that I was bracing for impact that never came. This was impact. And it wasn't chaos. It was procedure. That night, Marissa showed up unannounced. I didn't open the door at first. I stood on the other side, listening to her breathing, the way she shifted her weight like she always did when she was nervous. "Ellie," she whispered. "Please. I know you're in there." I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Her eyes were red. Her makeup smudged. She looked smaller somehow. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "About the audit. About the lawyer stepping aside." I tilted my head. "Why didn't you tell me Lucas would meet me at the docks?" Her mouth opened. Closed. "That's not," she started. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't lie now. It's too late for that." She stepped back like I'd struck her. "I was trying to protect you." "No," I said. "You were trying to control what I knew." Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. "He promised it wouldn't go this far," she finally said, voice cracking. "He said you'd get scared. That you'd back off." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Who is he?" She looked away. I waited. "My uncle," she whispered. There it was. Not shocking. Not surprising. Just confirmation. "You fed him information," I said. "About what I found. About the accounts. About me." Tears spilled down her face. "I didn't think he was stealing. Not like that. He said it was temporary. That your father owed him. That it would all be settled. And when it wasn't? He said you were unstable. That grief was making you paranoid." I laughed once. Short. Bitter. "And you believed him." She nodded, shoulders shaking. "Until the articles came out. Until the audit. Until Lucas stopped answering my calls." I stepped aside, finally letting her in. Not out of kindness. Out of curiosity. She sat on the couch like it might collapse under her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," I said. "Now the truth keeps moving forward without asking permission." She looked up at me, eyes pleading. Am I in trouble?" I thought of my father's video. Time creates mistakes. "Yes," I said honestly. "But not because of me. Because of what you chose." She flinched. "I didn't report you," I continued. "Not yet. I documented everything. Every message. Every inconsistency. The law will decide what matters." She nodded slowly, like someone accepting a verdict before it's spoken. "I should go," she said. "Yes," I agreed. At the door, she hesitated. "Ellie, I really am sorry." I held her gaze. "Being sorry doesn't undo harm. It just means you finally see it." After she left, I locked the door and leaned my forehead against it, breathing deeply until the tension eased. The next week blurred into meetings and emails and carefully worded statements. Investigators asked questions. Lawyers asked better ones. I answered all of them with documents, timestamps, and restraint. My uncle didn't contact me again. But I saw him. On the news. A still image of him exiting a building, jaw clenched, tie crooked, cameras flashing. The caption read, "Family estate manager under formal investigation." Image was everything. And his was cracking. One evening, as I was organizing the last of my father's letters, I found a note I'd missed before. Folded small. No date. "You don't owe anyone your silence." I pressed it to my chest. Weeks later, the charges were filed. Not just financial fraud. Conspiracy. Obstruction. Multiple counts, layered and precise. The kind that didn't collapse under pressure. People started telling the story differently after that. At the funeral, I had been greedy. Now I was brave. Now I was strong. Now I was doing what anyone would do. I didn't correct them. Because the truth was quieter. The truth was that I hadn't wanted revenge. I hadn't wanted to expose my family. I had wanted answers. And once I had them, silence wasn't an option anymore. The last time I saw my uncle was in a hallway outside a courtroom. No audience. No speeches. Just us. He looked older. Smaller. His confidence had drained away, leaving something raw behind. "You think this makes you better than me," he said softly. "No," I replied. "It makes me honest." He scoffed. "Your father ruined everything." I shook my head. "You did. He just stopped protecting you." For a moment, he looked like he might say something else. Something real. But the guards called his name, and that was it. When it was over, when the sentencing came, when the estate was restructured, when the accounts were returned and the headlines faded, I sat alone in my apartment again. The box was empty now. The proof had done its job. I thought about the girl standing in the church, accused of wanting money. I thought about the sealed box in my hands. And I realized something quietly, without triumph or bitterness. I hadn't come for money. I had come for the truth. And once it was out, there was no putting it back. What would you have done if staying silent meant protecting a lie, and speaking up meant losing everyone who benefited from it?